Welcome to BioBalance Healthcast. I'm Dr. Kathy Maupin.
And I'm Brett Newcomb. And today we're going to be talking about the second in the hormone trilogies. We talk a lot about testosterone, and testosterone being the trigger event or the first domino that falls in the cascade of aging and the subsequent deterioration that comes from the cascade of aging. And the second one of those dominoes that falls is a different hormone, and it's called progesterone. And progesterone, I guess they're all unique. They each have their own specific things
They have their
that
role.
they do. Their role.
Their role. Everything in your body has a specific role.
Yeah.
And progesterone's role is to balance estrogen and to prepare the lining of the uterus. This is the original role. Prepare the lining of the uterus.
The original role, and then there's the revised
and then
role.
and then there's the role that happens after you start aging. But the real function of progesterone is to balance estrogen in the second half of the cycle. It doesn't even occur until day 14 or whatever your ovulation day is. And then on ovulation, we get exposed to progesterone to balance out the estrogen to make a nice cozy home for an embryo to implant. And if there's no embryo, then what happens is it sheds. So 14 days is all we make it, and then it sheds. And then we have a period. Progesterone drops to almost nothing, and our estrogen drops as well. Testosterone stays the same, it's stabilizing.
Right.
And then we start over again the next month. Estrogen first, and then testosterone's always there, and then progesterone happens on day 14. So it's this never-ending cycle until you hit perimenopause or menopause, and or after your testosterone leaves or decreases, then our progesterone starts dropping or is non-existent, and so estrogen is unbalanced.
So, and that's the issue. When the progesterone isn't there, even though you're not, if you've gone through menopause and you're not having that same 28-day cycle, if your progesterone drops, then the negative effect of that is your estrogen is larger by comparison. It's bigger than it should be.
No, estrogen isn't produced after menopause, but after TDS, it's still being produced.
Okay.
It's the last hormone to go.
All right.
So the first thing is testosterone, then progesterone going down or stopping, and then we still have estrogen. So estrogen is making the lining very thickened, and it's making it unstable. And so that's why people bleed a lot.
Right.
So before menopause, there's a lot of bleeding. Fibroids grow because fibroids grow under the influence of estrogen, and progesterone usually holds them at bay.
Fibroid tumors?
Fibroid tumors in the uterus. And that can cause bleeding or hysterectomy. So that whole imbalance is a reason for many different procedures and problems in OBGYN.
Okay, so you were telling me that ACOG, which is
The American College of OBGYN, which I'm a fellow in ACOG.
Okay, that ACOG does acknowledge the existence of PMS.
Yeah, progesterone dropping is PMS.
All right.
It does cause
so
PMS.
they say it's a real event. It really does happen. Women really do suffer from it, but they don't agree that it's triggered by or precipitated by the drop in progesterone.
Right.
But
That's right.
experientially,
physiologically, it makes sense because if you draw blood work on people with PMS,
right,
then you compare them to people who don't have it. There are several studies like this, that the progesterone is low during that second half of the cycle in people with PMS.
So we're back to the issue about correlation versus causation.
Right.
You can track it and say, look, this data flow is consistent across the spectrum. But they're not willing to say, they're willing to say, yeah, it's consistent, but they're not willing to say it's causative.
Right.
All right.
That's right.
So,
and
at the end of the day, does it really matter if there's a treatment that makes people feel better?
That's true, but they say that PMS is from a lack of serotonin.
Okay.
Okay, serotonin's a neurotransmitter, and lo and behold, progesterone stimulates serotonin. So they're telling us, well, yes, we know that progesterone is in the cycle, and we know in the second half of the cycle, and we know PMS is in the second half of the cycle.
Right.
But they're skipping the hormone that causes it, and they're getting to the outcome, which is a lowered neurotransmitter called serotonin, and that gives us depression. So it's all about...
It's like the color wheel that you learn about in grade school. You take these two colors and put them
Yeah.
together, you get this color, and they say,
Right.
yeah, that color exists, but they don't say you put these two together to get it.
And there have been a lot of studies on this, and
Yeah.
they don't recognize or acknowledge the studies that it is progesterone in between these two things.
Right. They say you have testosterone, you have progesterone, you have serotonin, you have depression, but they're all like independent little colors on the color wheel, and they're not saying you pull them together in these combinations
Right.
to get this.
And get the outcome. Now, lack of testosterone can cause a drop in serotonin as well, and we see depression with lack of testosterone. So oftentimes when dealing with depression, after you've ruled out situational depression,
Right.
we've talked about that, situational depression and depression from a family history source or an endogenous source has no cause and it has no relationship to hormones. When you rule those out, then we get to, let's look at a woman's cycle. Let's
Right.
look at her levels of estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone. But we can only look at progesterone in the second half of the cycle. So we have to do multiple blood draws.
Right.
And we often find that testosterone is low when all the way across the cycle, and that causes depression, even if the progesterone's normal. Now, when progesterone's low and testosterone's low, which is what happens in our 40s, we already have lost our testosterone. It's dropped. If we haven't replaced it, then our ovaries stop making a good level of progesterone. So the depression you might have survived from lack of testosterone is now even worse. And it's even worse in that second half of your cycle. So, not your cycle.
No. One's cycle.
One
a
cycle, a
yes.
woman's cycle.
A woman's cycle.
So in that way, by replacing the testosterone, we generally can get rid of depression in women prior to menopause. And we also need progesterone when it's prior to menopause. But after menopause, we just need testosterone and estradiol.
Right.
That I have no answer for. That I don't have a study for, I don't have an answer for, and I can't tell you why that happens. But progesterone doesn't seem to get along with a lot of women after menopause, and we don't give them enough estrogen to really warrant progesterone unless they have a uterus. And that's
Right.
another caveat. Medicine is really complex, and when I start to take it apart into why we do everything,
Right.
then I realize how complex it is. Because in my mind, I go through 20 neuron
It's
synapses.
like a decision
and,
matrix that you
yeah.
have to go check to get to.
Which is why it's very individualized, and it's so important to go to somebody who knows what you're suffering from and what your cycle is or no cycle, if you've had a hysterectomy or not. It knows all of your history, knows whether you've had your depression or whatever symptom evaluated, and puts it all together.
Well, and it's both a science and an art. You know, you have to know the science and you have to know the data, but the art comes in your skill of sort of riding the waves of the data to make an intervention.
Right.
If you just look at the data and you don't have the causal link, then you're back to saying there's no color wheel there's just a set of colors, you know, on the continuum, like a rainbow. You know, they go from this color to that color. You have to be able to listen to what a patient is telling you, describe their symptoms, look at their data, and then know empirically what has worked in your experience for that patient.
And I'm not positive that every doctor needs to understand the physiology,
Right.
but when my mind works and I'm looking at a patient, it really helps that I go back to the basic physiology of what's going on. At this point in time, what hormones is she producing? What neurotransmitters is she producing? And in my
What
mind,
side effects is she complaining of? Is she depressed? Is she lethargic? Is she angry?
has she gained weight? Has she lost her libido? Now, my key question when someone has signs of PMS, lack of progesterone, is, how's your libido? Now, their libido could be gone during the second half of the cycle and be okay on the rest if they're so angry because they don't have progesterone. They get that
Right.
anger symptom of PMS. However, most of them say,
So you're telling me that when women are angry, their libido is impeded?
probably who would want to have sex when you're with somebody who's really, really, really angry
Really
at
mad,
you?
yeah, exactly.
So I'm not sure if their libido's that study's not been done
but
either.
it's not a causal connection.
No.
It's a correlated connection.
It's a correlated connection. I can't put the cause and effect to that. But generally, if I think, oh, this patient has PMS, clearly she has symptoms that start mid-cycle and end at the end of the cycle.
Right.
She has relief with a period. When she has a period, she feels better. Patients usually say, I only have one good week a month.
Oh, wow.
That's my favorite statement because then I know that's PMS.
And that's your window of opportunity, is that one good week a
Right.
month.
That's
the rest
right.
of it is like, stay away
Right,
from me,
it's
don't
usually
touch me.
when they're having their
Yeah.
period.
Right.
And so then that may be
Because the
problematic
progesterone
for
is
some
in
people.
there in the mix, and that offsets the negative affect.
No, because their estrogen went down.
Because their estrogen.
Their estrogen went down, so they don't need the progesterone. So right at a period, both hormones drop.
Okay.
And you're asking the questions that everybody asks me in my office.
Well, yeah.
So when both hormones drop, then
Right.
you don't need the progesterone to balance your estrogen.
So then the testosterone
The
can shine through and win
still
out.
there.
Yeah.
If
All
you
right.
have testosterone.
If you have it.
Now, sadly, if you're 45 and your testosterone already dropped, then you're already getting PMS. I always like to tell the story of I always kind of view it as like the red tent, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Only the nomads the male nomads leave the tent for a different reason.
Right.
And that's everybody's living in the same tent, everything's great, and then they hit 40 and then there's no sex drive.
Mm-hmm.
So portion of these guys are going to go gone
Yeah.
because we don't have a sex drive anymore and we don't feel like we need them.
Right.
No testosterone makes you feel like, what are you still doing here home?
Yeah.
Why are you here? I don't need you anymore.
Right.
It makes your brain think like that. So that's the first step. Then if they were lucky enough to live to 50 and they got to mid-40s, then half the month were, and I'm not trying to be demeaning to women, they tell me that they do this.
Right.
They're screaming and yelling at their children.
Right.
They're screaming at their husband. Nobody does anything right. And then another portion of the men go, see you later. I mean, PMS, it breaks up marriages. I
Yeah.
mean, it really
Oh, it
does if
absolutely
you don't
does.
fix it.
Right.
And so then we get to that last little nubbin of guys that were so kind and nice, and then they get to menopause. And then that's it. They're done because no sex. Sex hurts for their partner.
Right.
So, and their partners are still not happy. They're not having the cyclic, who am I going to be today? Who am I
Right.
going to be tomorrow? But they have this, I don't need you. Why are you still here? From the no testosterone. And then they go into kind of a shriveled up state in most cases, not everybody. But, and they're not interested in anything. They lose their energy. So the rest of the guys are like, unless they're depressed, they're like, see ya. So I just visualize all these exoduses over time.
So you're using a lot of pronouns, they and their. You're really talking about messages from women to men.
To their spouse,
I don't
to
need
their
you.
partner.
Why are you here? I'm not interested in sex. You're getting on my nerves. Leave me alone.
It doesn't have to be to men either, because my
Can
patients.
also be to children.
Well, no,
I don't need you around
no,
here
but
anymore either.
my patients who are lesbians do this with their partners.
Right.
And the partners come in going,
Yeah.
"What happened?"
Right.
It's not just that we start screaming at men. I mean, I remember doing this, and I remember investigating PMS
Yeah.
because back in the 80s,
Well, and they
That
say
was
this
like
is not
a
me. This is
lifetime
not the
ago.
way I have always been, and I still love this person, but man, I don't have any energy for that, and I
Right.
don't want it, and I'm not interested.
well, they're
in
not
it.
even really. I mean, I'd get to work, and I know it was going to be one of those days,
Yeah.
and I'd like walk up to the receptionist and go, "Okay, today's going to be a bad day for me."
Wow.
So everybody just tread lightly because I don't want to lose my temper.
So then you feel crazy because you know your body is doing something and you don't have any control over it.
Right. I mean, that was 1985 after I had my daughter. It was even worse postpartum. Then in 1986, it got worse and worse. And then my patients are coming in saying the same thing. So I ended up trying vitamins. There was a psychiatrist.
Oh, yeah, you try all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I tried vitamins because there's a psychiatrist in our building who I'm good friends with. And he said, oh, nutrition. It helps progesterone.
Red dye number 2.
It helps
don't
PMS.
Eat any sugar.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, you try everything.
Yeah, and really the vitamins helped a little. They took a tiny bit of the edge off.
Okay.
So magnesium was the primary thing in the vitamin. There were some other herbs, and it did work. But then I still got back to the fact that it didn't work at all for some women. It barely worked for me. It still was a problem.
Right.
And I was in my 30s, and I didn't want to be like that the rest of my life. So I talked to the pharmacist who made my vitamins.
Right.
These vitamins for PMS. And he said, oh, yeah, just think about it. It's progesterone. Why don't you have your patients try progesterone suppositories? That's all they made progesterone, natural progesterone in. You can't swallow progesterone and expect it to be progesterone when it hits your body. So it can't be a pill.
Because of that first pass effect.
Right. It goes through your stomach and gets changed.
Right.
There are 2 new preps of progesterone that sometimes work.
Okay.
And one is done by a compounding pharmacy in Colorado. One is Prometrium, which is an RX. It's natural progesterone that you can just get with a prescription. It doesn't always work this way, but most of the time you have to take progesterone non-orally. So it has to be under your tongue, it has to be in the vagina, it has to be in a cream, it has to be...
Wait a minute. Non-orally means you don't swallow it.
You don't swallow it.
You can put it under your tongue.
Under your tongue and let it dissolve into your bloodstream.
Okay.
It goes directly into the bloodstream.
And that's called sublingual.
Sublingual.
So you
Buccal,
get that.
you can have a lozenge that has progesterone in it.
You don't swallow it,
you don't swallow it, you let it dissolve.
Okay.
You swallow too much of that, so I usually don't write that.
Right.
And then there's creams, but creams have to be applied all day long, basically. And it just has a
every
short
so many hours. You have to stop and okay.
Yeah. So so at that time, the only thing he had was rectal suppositories.
Right.
And that's what I offered my patients, and they used them and they were better. Now they weren't better with the vitamins, but they were better with that.
So the absorption that way balances it out over time. So they're better, like the creams, you're better for a couple of hours.
Creams just have a short half-life. That means half of it's gone in just a few hours in general. Not all creams, but in general. So that means you're going to put on the inside of your arm.
Right.
Or you're going to put on the inside of your thighs because it's thinner skin. So that has to be applied kind of all day long, like every 4 hours.
And it's not
Otherwise,
a consistent dose absorption.
Right, then you're like better PMS. Right. As I mean, that's not a good thing either.
Yeah.
So having a consistent dose of progesterone is really important.
Well, and if you're a working woman, like if you're a classroom teacher and you've got, hourly classes.
If you're a surgeon, you don't go to the bathroom even like 2 times a day.
Excuse me, I have to go treat my thighs.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have any alone time. Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't say it that way.
No, of course you wouldn't say it that way.
But the progesterone has to be delivered in a certain fashion. Well, they didn't have all these things then.
Right.
They just had the rectal suppositories, and I have to tell you, that would be a hard sell today. But most of my patients were so desperate that they do it.
They're willing to consider anything.
And it made them better. And then I had an entire horde of women who went and told everybody they were better from their PMS, and you never knew that all these women had PMS. So they came in to get treated. The other thing it did, which was so awesome, was that it stopped their weird periods, because when you don't have enough progesterone, you bleed all the time.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, every 2 or 3 days you start bleeding.
You just start bleeding.
So it's not like you have a period, it's like you have a
constant period.
Yes.
So by giving them the progesterone after 3 months, we gave it to them day 14 through 28, their periods were regular.
Right.
And they were calm.
Less painful?
And no, not less painful.
Okay.
They're not less painful because progesterone oftentimes causes the prostaglandins in the lining of the uterus to be activated. So
okay.
No, not less
So
painful.
it doesn't address that issue.
No, it doesn't. But it does help with infertility, and I did infertility for a long time.
Right.
And there were many women who couldn't, these same women who had PMS couldn't get pregnant because they could not develop the lining of the uterus with progesterone. They didn't have enough. So we had to supplement it.
So it's such an individually detailed chemistry question.
Yeah.
But you can globally say that the reduction of testosterone, the reduction of progesterone, and estrogen all have to be balanced within ranges. And then the range specifically has to be adapted to the needs of the woman and the lifestyle. Okay? So if that is attended to, then this cascade of aging issues goes away, essentially.
Right.
I mean, you get
Essentially,
older,
it
but all
reverses
of those breakdown issues go away.
Right.
So the challenge then is to find a physician that is aware of this information and subscribes to the idea, whether ACOG puts a causal definition to it or not.
It approves treatment with progesterone, but just not for PMS.
Yeah, not specifically for that. So you talk to a physician that will empirically work with you for adjusting your chemistry set with these chemicals, these hormones, so that you feel better and life is worth living again.
That's right. That's right. And I think that that's an important take-home message, because this is a complicated subject. You can't talk about it in 20 minutes, and actually,
it's different for every single woman.
Right.
Based on her unique chemistry.
And I'm not trying to teach medicine to our listeners, because
Well, no.
you can't
we don't want you treating yourself.
Yeah, we don't want you to treat yourself, but we do want you to be informed about the things that are causing your problem, and it's not hopeless, and you can be treated for it. There is some severe PMS, I just want to make sure we talk about this, that has to have serotonin additions, meaning antidepressants and progesterone together. And so that's for the severest cases.
But again, that requires a conversation with a physician who's aware.
That's right.
So if you have questions about these issues, if what we're talking about triggers that aha experience for you of like, dadgummit, that's what my mother has that, then have your mother go to her doctor and sit down and talk about the question of progesterone and the question of serotonin if there are more severe issues.
And PMS, because people are afraid to say that because their doctors say, oh, well, crazy, see this psychiatrist. So it's not always an easy thing to bring up. So, but if you would like more information, you can write us at podcast@biobalancehealth.com, or you can go to our website at biobalancehealth.com, or you can call my office at 314-993-0963.
And you can always reach me at brettnewcomb.com.